Welcome back to the show. Today, I want to share some thoughts with you on tips from the top. And if you don't know already, what I have done for the last, roughly 30 years now, is I've acquired a lot of information from some really smart people. People like Brian Tracy and Anthony Robbins and Jim Rohn and a bunch of other people. I have tons of books at my library at home. So I share those ideas and tips among my own ideas with people around the world a lot. So today I want to share some thoughts from my fourth book called Build Your Foundation. So that's the theme of this show. Again, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So if I can pass on an idea or two for you to help you in your life, then I think it's going to be a win-win for you and for me. So in chapter 2 of my book, Build Your Foundation, I called it Contentment is Destroyed. ... Contentment is destroyed. So let me kind of jump into this text with you. It says, here's a quote I came across years ago: contentment is destroyed by comparison. Again, contentment is destroyed by comparison. What does that mean? So what I did in the book is I share a little story, an illustration about what I'm talking about. Here's the story. Little Johnny's mother places a large piece of chocolate cake on his plate. He's pretty happy with it. In fact, he's very happy with it until he glances over at his brother's portion and notices that that piece of cake is even bigger. Suddenly, Johnny is no longer satisfied with what he got. He starts to pout and complain, and he may even resort to throwing his cake on the floor. I think you've met a child or two that has behaved in that way. So I write, it's hard for some of us to be satisfied with our own toys, our gifts, our talents, or our blessings. In fact, when I grew up in the 70s, that's how old I am, I had a friend who wore the best shoes. I mean, the best shoes, and back then the heels were like this. And as a young person, I wanted to be hip. I wanted to be in style. So when he outgrew them, he would pass those shoes to me. But there was a problem, you see. My feet were smaller, and still are, smaller than his feet. But that didn't stop me. I stuffed socks in the ends of the shoes so my feet would actually fit. I was no longer happy with my own shoes. I wanted those fancy shoes. I wanted those fancy boots. Years later, a friend of mine bought a Honda Civic, and I envied that car for months. So one day, while my wife was at work and I was out seeing my insurance clients, I decided that day I was going to buy a Honda Civic. Hadn't discussed it with my wife at all. Rule number 1, don't do that. Do not go out and buy a vehicle without discussing it with your spouse. So I go to the car dealer. I proceed to make a deal. I thought it was a good deal. The guy was going to, as you've heard before when you've bought cars, look, sir, I'm going to throw in the floor mats for you free of charge. For real? So I decided that I was going to buy that car. I really wanted that Honda Civic. It was just a nicer car, a lot nicer car than the car I was driving. So I called my wife up at work, and mind you, this is before we had kids. And I said, Tammy, I'm going to buy a Honda Civic today. We hadn't discussed payments. I didn't talk anything to the wife about this. And she said very calmly, because she was at work and around other people, she says something to the effect of, if that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. And you could feel the ice coming through that phone. It's just the tone in which she said, if you feel that's what you really want to do, go ahead and do it. It wasn't, oh, great, we needed another car. It wasn't like that at all. So knowing the tone of that conversation, I knew that once I got home with this new car and an extra $300 or $400 a month that we had to pay out for the next 5 years, it wasn't going to be a very happy relationship for the next 5 years. So I decided right then and there that I need to walk out of the car dealer and keep the car I was driving for a lot longer. Contentment is destroyed by comparison. I was happy with the car I was driving until I saw my friend pull up with his new Honda Civic that I wanted really, really bad. When you and I compare ourselves to other people, we usually come up with three conclusions when we do that. The first one is we're better than they are. That's one point of view. Or maybe they're better than we are. Or maybe we'd rather be them than us. Have you ever been in situations, maybe at work, where people come in with the best looking clothes and maybe they went out and spent a bunch of money on stuff that maybe you didn't have to spend? So you were envious of them and wanted to be like them and dress like them, but you knew that you couldn't do that. So you would look at them with envy in your eyes and jealousy in your heart because you wanted what they had. I'm talking about here right this moment about comparing ourselves with other people. And I guess more importantly is comparing what you don't have as compared to what they do have. You know, it took me a long time, quite a number of years, to realize or to understand that I was born with certain gifts and talents that were unique that other people might not have. And I might suggest to you that you are born with several gifts and talents that other people don't have. So when you and I devalue those gifts and talents that we have, then it really lowers us in the eyes of other people, and then we devalue our gifts and our talents. There's a building in almost every zip code, it's called a library. And a library is jammed full of information about people and written by people that have fallen on their faces more times than I care to share. Brian Tracy is one of them. Mark Sanborn is another. Jim Rohn, a guy lived till I think in his 70s or 80s. Smart guy. Impacted millions of people. Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N, Jim Rohn. Tremendous, a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones. Let me share a quick story. Charlie Jones had a bookstore in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania for decades. So one day, several years ago, I wanted to meet Mr. Jones. And I realized that he was a busy man. I didn't even know if he was going to be there that day, but I was going to go up there anyway to buy some books to give to those people on staff. So I drove up to Mechanicsburg. It was about an hour and change from where I lived. And I was wandering around the store and asked the person that was working in the store if Mr. Jones was going to be, or if he's there, or if he's going to be back anytime soon. Well, the guy said that he was going to come back, and he ran an errand, and he was going to come back to the store shortly. So I stuck around. Spent more money than maybe I should have that day because I was waiting to meet Mr. Jones. Now, if you have never heard of Charlie Tremendous Jones, Google him, watch him on YouTube. He is very charismatic. I mean, very charismatic. So I was getting ready to leave because I waited around quite a while, at least an hour, waiting for him to come back to, that he was going to do some errands. Now, he didn't know I was going to come up there, so it's not like he was late or anything. I just showed up. So as I got ready to leave, I was standing on the sidewalk of this place, of this store, talking to the employee who was in the store at the time. So the employee said, "Here comes Mr. Jones now." So I had stepped onto the street side. So there was the sidewalk, and I was down on the street side, literally just off the curb. So Charlie Jones, he came up, and I would say at the time, he was probably 6'2", 6'3", I'm guessing. And I was a good several inches below him. I'm shorter than him, but also I'm now lower because I'm standing on the street and he's up on the sidewalk. So he looks at me, and the employee who I had been talking to for the last hour introduced me to him. And Mr. Jones, he said, "Wait a minute, you're John Carver? You're the John Carver?" Now, I know and still know that Mr. Jones was kind of flowering the introduction. He didn't know me from Adam. But he went on and on and on, trying to make me feel really good. So all of a sudden, he grabbed me, literally, he grabbed me. Now remember, I'm several inches shorter than him because I'm standing on the street now. And he began to bear hug me. So imagine this, the side of my face is smashed against his chest when he was giving me this huge bear hug because he was saying out loud and very loudly that he was very happy to meet me. So he invited me back into the shop, and we sat and talked for quite a while, and he shared some of his history and his stories. And this is a guy that's impacted millions of people. It made me understand right then and there that he was trying to make me feel important. And when you and I devalue the gifts and the talents that maybe we're born with, or maybe that we want to develop, or maybe we want to invest some time in and some education in, then we really lower our own opportunities. We lower our potential in the world these days. So when you go to the library, you can read books about these people and so many other folks that are out there in the self-improvement section. Please go there consistently. If you can't afford to buy the books, go to the library and read the books. There's no better you than you. It's really not. You are so unique. Stop trying to be someone that you're not. Back in 1994, I was given the opportunity to take over a job for somebody else who was a very type A, my way or the highway personality style. And that is not my personality style at all. So this person had built this entity, this group over 20 plus years. And I was coming in not as a type A personality. In fact, I'm privately very shy and very quiet, actually. This guy's never been quiet, never been shy, always, in your face and loud and again, my way or the highway. So I was very intimidated, frankly, that I was going to come in after this guy that had established a system, that had established a pattern that was going to be different than my system or my pattern. So the intimidation factor was substantial. So it took me quite a while, quite a number of months to get through my head that I didn't have to be like the founder of this group, because I am me and the founder is the founder. Again, I'll say it multiple times. When you devalue who you are, then you devalue the opportunities that you have with the people around you. When you try to be somebody that you're not, it's really obvious to the people around you. This concept literally changed my life. It took me, because I'm pretty dense, it took me several years. But if you don't fear who you are, and if you don't devalue who you are, then you're going to be able to realize some opportunities in your life that only you can accomplish and not anybody else. In chapter 6, I share a concept called LISOR, L-I-S-O-R. Let me just give you a background on where that came from. In 1988, I was 21 years old. So do the math and you know how old I am as of this taping. I was working as an insurance agent with a company called Sun Life Insurance Company of America, and I had two managers. The first manager's name is Joe Ciampa. The second manager's name is John McGinnis. And John McGinnis was roughly 50, 52, 53 years old at the time. I was, again, 21. So what we did is when I went out to sell insurance at that time, my area, my territory was in the inner city of Baltimore, Maryland. Higher crime area, lower income. People that would, generally speaking, and I'm using a stereotype right now, would, generally speaking, not hesitate in telling you how they feel. So I was getting pretty frustrated. I was having a difficult time in the beginning, and John McGinnis would pull me into his office and we would just talk, and he would calm my nerves down because I tend to be hyper. And one day he just looked at me and said, "John, LISOR, L-I-S-O-R. And I was a average student in school. I said, "What in the world does LISOR mean?" He says, L, lacking in sense or reason. LISOR, L-I-S-O-R, lacking in sense or reason. This is 1988. And to this day, when I come across people that are frustrating, I'll be polite, that get on my last nerve, that constantly dance on my last nerve, I think of what John McGinnis told me, which is Lisor, L-I-S-O-R. So I'm wondering if you maybe have dealt with people and still deal with people in your life that no matter what you do, no matter how you try to help them, they just don't get it, or maybe they don't even want to understand or learn more. This can be one of the most frustrating feelings that you can experience. I know that information can change people's lives, no doubt about it, but some people don't want to learn from the people who've mastered some really important things in their life. So one of the things I've learned from John McGinnis and others is that they have to have a teachable point of view. This is critical. If you and I want to learn anything, we have to have a teachable point of view. If you and I think we know everything, if we think that we have all the answers, guess what? We're not going to have a teachable point of view. This is how former CEO of General Electric, Jack Welch, rebuilt General Electric. He taught his executives to promote a mindset he called of conscious incompetence. That is knowing that you don't know, and don't be afraid of admitting that you don't know. Do you know how many people around you and around me don't want to admit that they don't know? Think about that a minute. How many people around you don't like to admit that they don't know that they don't know? The biggest step forward you can reach in your life is when you admit that you know that you don't know. Because if you don't know that you don't know, there's nothing anybody can really do for you. But when you know that you don't know, your life can literally begin to change in a dramatic way. Seth Godin wrote, "The reason coachability is so crucial is that without it," he says, "you don't have the emotional maturity to consider whether the advice is good or not. You reject the process out of hand and end up stuck." Think about that a minute. When you come across people that know it all, maybe you've been there. Maybe you've reached a point in your life, or maybe you had a point in your life where you thought you knew it all. And you plateaued. Think about the people in your life who you've known for 20 years, and you just casually look at their lives and realize that they have not evolved in the last 20 years. They haven't gotten better. They haven't learned anything new. Because they go back to this concept of what they know, and what they believe they know is going to carry them through a lifetime of living. Well, that's not always the case. So because people that you know, and I know a ton of people who still go back and still deal with that Lisor mentality, L-I-S-O-R. So don't be one of those people that when people look at you, you keep falling over the same hole. You keep falling in the same hole every single week and realize that, wait a minute, I should know better. I'm smarter than this, frankly. In chapter 11 of my book, Build Your Foundation, I call it Reframe Your Life. Reframe Your Life. I write, and I'm not talking about changing the frame around a photograph or a painting. I'm talking about how you see and respond to what's going on around you. The dictionary definition is really, reframing is to look at or to present or to think of or a new idea or a different way. Context reframing is really important. Let me share a story that Robert Sandridge and Ann Ward wrote. Let me share it. Context reframing is taking an experience that seems to be negative and showing how the same behavior or experience can be useful in another context. For example, the other nine reindeer made fun of Rudolph's bright red nose, but that funny nose made Rudolph the hero on a dark night. Content reframing, they write, is simply changing the meaning of a situation. That is, the situation or the behavior stays the same, but the meaning changed, like Rudolph's nose. For instance, a famous army general reframed a distressful situation for his troops by telling them, we're not retreating, we're just advancing in another direction. We're talking about building your foundation. We're talking about learning from the best of the best. Tips from the top is really the bigger picture of this show. There's a huge advantage of reframing. It enables you to give new meaning to a situation in your present or even your past, frankly. In other words, you can choose whether the glass is half full or half empty, even if you drank the water 20 years ago. And I'll be the first to tell you, that's really hard to do. Really hard to do, to look at things differently than what you see them right now. I struggle with that every single day, so I'm preaching to the choir here, believe you me. Reframing takes people from despair to hope, from discouragement to optimism, from fear to courage. Years ago, I avoided driving in Washington, D.C. because I looked at the map and I felt like I'd surely get lost. So it took somebody else to help me explain how Washington, D.C. was set up and how I can navigate it easily. He helped me reframe my attitude, so today I have no problem driving in Washington, D.C. because he helped me reframe my opinion of what the city was like. W. Clement Stone, the great executive, said, every great man, every successful man or woman, I might add, no matter what the field of endeavor, has known the magic that lies in these words. Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. Let me share that again. Every great person, no matter what the field of endeavor, has known the magic that lies in these words. Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. So I ask me, how many people do you know who they've made conclusions based upon information that needs to be reframed? Some people call it learned helplessness. Learned helplessness. W. Clement Stone, he was a great insurance executive decades ago. When anything bad would happen, he would always come back, that's good. That's good. I'm not there yet, because when bad stuff happens to me, that's the last thing that pops in my head, that's good. But I'm talking about reframing what has happened to you in the past, because all of us have had some really raunchy stuff that happened to us in the past, as children, as teenagers, as young adults, some nasty stuff. And some of us are still carrying that nasty stuff through years of our adulthood, which is really dragging us down in a consistent way. So bondage is really the ability for us, we kind of put ourselves in our own prison, our own mental prison, by refusing to learn from some people who've come through some very tough times in their lives, because these people who have come through the very tough times in their lives and they've written about it, then we don't have to necessarily go through the same struggles. We can learn from their struggles, stand on their shoulders, learn from them, and then move forward a lot faster than what we have been in the past. All of us have a choice. We have a choice every single day that we get out of bed. And in fact, M. Scott Peck wrote, learn not to dread, but actually to welcome problems. I'm not there. This is what this guy writes. Again, learn not to dread, but actually to welcome problems. He says your attitude is crucial. Look at what is holding you back and write down several ways that you can reframe what's going on around you. Reframing can literally change your life in a dramatic way. In chapter 13 of my book, Build Your Foundation, I talk about paying less attention to people that say a bunch of stuff that really do not do a bunch of stuff. And if you look really hard in the mirror, you've been there more times than probably you care to share. That is, you talk a bunch of smack, you talk a bunch of stuff, but you really don't back up the talk with action. Let me give you a little tip, a little secret that has worked for me because of my personality style. most of my lifetime, my life has been based in fear. I've been afraid of speaking in front of people because I've had some struggles with speaking, and I would be intimidated by branching out and doing new things because of the fear factor that I've struggled with for a long time. So what I did was I started to, when I wanted to do something way outside of my comfort zone, I would start telling people what I was going to do, and then that forced me to either do it or then be viewed as a liar. Again, it forced me to do it or to be viewed as a liar, and I never want to be viewed as a liar. So that's just one idea of some tips and some concepts that I can share with you today. That I shared 3 or 4 or 5 ideas, that if you master just these 3 or 4 ideas, you can get to the top in a much, much faster way, because all I'm doing is standing on the shoulders of giants, and maybe you can stand on my shoulders to reach your goals and your dreams for your life. Remember, I believe in you. I really do. We'll be back real soon. Thanks so much.